hang the donor badge under his tie, the night the museum turned off the lights. At 9:12 p.m., I found the badge by accident, the way people discover whether suddenly and without permission. I was straightening his tie from the hook by the door, the silk still warm with the last admissible hour of evening, when something thin and plastic clicked against the wall and slid to the floor. A clear sleeve, a gold-edged card, Artemis Museum Donor Evening After Hours Access. On the reverse, a black strip glossy as a good alibi. When I tilted it, a tiny diode winked once, as if it had a pulse and trusted mine to find it. Noah had left at 8 in the jacket that flatters him even when mirrors go evangelical. "Wrap toast," he said, 2 words that make celebration sound like paperwork. Then notes with Damien. "Don't wait." Damien is the kind of curator who wears stillness like cologne and says, "Let me show you something," the same way men with better intentions say please. The cinnamon thing I'd left warming in the oven pretended to be strategy. The apartment's light climbed the wall in tidy squares and refused to narrate me. I set the badge on the counter beside the bottle we'd been saving for a less complicated sense of occasion. I didn't text him. The distance between a thumb and a decision is a cliff at that hour. Instead, I put on the jacket that knows how to be quiet, slid the badge into my pocket until the diode pressed a small truth by my pulse, and let the door close behind me with a courtesy I didn't deserve. The Artemis sits at the top of a flight of stone that's been teaching people posture since the city was young enough to get away with sincerity. Brass behaves itself on the doors. The lobby smells like ambition and lemon, which is how museums apologize for having money. A guard at the podium looked at me with the professional mercy of a man who counts confessions like tips and spends neither in public. "Evening," he said, which is a word rooms use when they want to be friends. I showed him the badge because some rectangles are fluent where people cannot be. He nodded toward a side elevator I hadn't noticed in daylight, the kind of door you learn only if someone taught you. The lift hummed with the kind of competence you hear in operating rooms in good restaurants. On the wall, a brass plate announced destinations in tidy serif: conservation/sculpture garden/donor lounge. I pressed donor because tonight I was willing to borrow trouble in its native language. The mirror wrote my name backward and added a question mark. 3 floors later, a corridor offered me carpet strict enough to make my shoes behave. Somewhere inside the museum's lungs, HVAC negotiated with oil paint. The lounge door read private in letters too polite to be warnings. The badge made the lock glow like a secret deciding to be democracy. Inside was a hush generous enough to be mistaken for intimacy. Velvet chairs angled toward windows, lamps casting a studied forgiveness across a small bar. On a tray, 2 coupe glasses had been half-claimed by air, and a bottle of cold gin suggested someone believed in inheritance. In the corner, a temporary stanchion had been moved to allow an exit to the sculpture garden, because power is just traffic with better lighting. I didn't call his name. I let the garden open itself. Stone gathered night around itself like a shawl. Bronze stood the way good actors do when they're off stage. Above, the city forgot to blink. Along the far balustrade I saw 2 figures in profile, the shape of a conversation that had not yet named itself. Noah with his jacket off, shirt sleeves folded to a kind of argument. Damien with his hands on the cool stone, a posture that read as furniture if you didn't know how expensive the chair was. I was 3 steps from them when Noah turned. There's a half-second at the beginning of surprise where the truth shows up without its coat. I saw that half-second arrive. I watched him try to return it. "Cal," he said, my name softened to a receipt. "The museum is a better host than I am," I said, because humor is the leash I use to keep panic from running into traffic. I lifted the badge. It invited me without checking the guest list. Damien's mouth did a small human thing, not quite a smile, not quite an apology. He straightened just enough to suggest available restraint. "I'll give you to the room," he said, competence without offense. "Stay," I heard myself say. Even I was surprised. If I wanted theater, I would have texted. The night thought about rain and decided to be kind. We arranged ourselves in a triangle that felt as old as geometry and twice as useful. Noah braced his palms on the stone and then turned them up, as if unfolding a plan he didn't want to finish. "I lied when I left," he said. He doesn't add adjectives when he wants to be correct. Rap happened. People applied their best grammar to goodbye. I told myself I wanted 30 minutes where being interesting didn't need to pass inspection. "Damien," I said, because names are handles and I like my hands full when the floor tilts. Damien glanced at the bronze that had been ignoring us with such professionalism. I felt obliged to thank it. "He asked to see the blue provinces in raking light," he said. "I'm guilty of liking people who want to see the underneath of things." Are you sleeping with him? The question is a cliff. There isn't a scenic route. You count to one and use your mouth like an adult. "Not yet," Noah said, clean, immediate. Then lower, the honesty that knows which muscle wants to bruise. I brought my mouth. The wind tested the open part of my shirt and decided to stay. Somewhere behind us, a compressor began or ended thinking. The night rearranged its furniture. I lifted 2 fingers to the inside of his wrist where men keep their apologies and felt his pulse write my name without permission. His eyes closed like doors that had learned to trust hands more than hinges. "You like the kind of wanting that proves something kindness can't," I said, and I didn't make it cruel. Cruelty is the lazy cousin of precision. You treat intimacy like a sport and honesty like off-season training. "You like to coach," he said, mouth trying to remember how not to be handsome. "Which is unfair and how we didn't break when we were supposed to." "What do you want?" I asked. Now not the apology you drafted for daylight. He stepped into the last inch of air that had turned into a lie while we were deciding what to be. Heat traveled across cotton the way forgiveness can if you give it directions. He spoke so close my lower lip learned punctuation. "I want to go home," he said. "I want you to want me where our towels remember us, where desire isn't named for a wing of a building." Damien exhaled, a small sound, not approval, oxygen deciding to do its simplest job. In the black glass beyond the garden, the 3 of us looked thinner than truth. I used my mouth to correct proportion. The first kiss wasn't hunger. It was relief, an appetite you can walk home. He leaned into it like a debt that finally liked its math. Under my palm, at the small of his back where his body keeps its best arguments, heat forgave everything it could afford to. He made the low sound he cannot perform on cue, the sound that reminds me our kitchen is holy. The bronze pretended to mind its own business. I stopped before the museum could pretend to be a witness. He kept his forehead near mine because punctuation succeeds where grammar pleads. When we turned back, Damien had demonstrated the good manners of vanishing without making the air proud about it. A white card sat on the lounge bar with his number in museum handwriting and a note that only said lock. We didn't take the lift with mirrors. We took the stairs because bodies that have just remembered themselves prefer to be honest with machines. The guard at the podium looked up and managed to be kind without being curious. Outside, weather declined to narrate us. I loved it for that. At home, the cinnamon had kept faith. We ate it with our fingers because forks would have lied. He leaned into the counter, the posture he uses when he's willing to be moved. I slid my palm under his shirt and found the heat like an address that had not forgotten its owner. He tipped toward me, gratitude making him heavy in exactly the way I've trained myself to respect. We were careful in bed, not the kind of careful that kills heat, the kind that knows where to fold it. He knows where to set his palm on my ribs so the rest of me remembers how to turn without issuing a press release. I know where his shoulder hides when it doesn't want to confess, and how to coax it until truth arrives with breath instead of grammar. I won't draw you a map. I'll tell you the room remembered to breathe, and the morning forgave us because it had other work. We slept the kind of sleep with terms and conditions. Light drafted across the wall in pale shapes ambitious enough to be promises. He made coffee the way he does when he wants me to listen. I opened the window to see if Mercy could afford our rent. The badge lay between us like a witness deciding whether testimony is worth it. He started with small truths because small truths keep larger ones upright. The notes had run long. The painting under raking light made the city feel negotiable. Damien's attention had the grammar he wanted to try on. Then he ran out of script and said the part I could keep. He said he's tired of being interesting for a living. He said he wanted to be wanted like teenagers are, stupid, earnest, badly lit, forgiven in advance. He said he imagined my mouth more than once in that garden and felt ashamed of the math. He said he was sorry like a man who knows sorry is a tool, not an eraser. I didn't forgive him at the table. Forgiveness is a daylight animal in morning's charge. I told him to put on the coat that doesn't belong to museums and walk with me to the canal where water lies about Paris, and we let it. On the bench we like, pigeons performed competence, and a runner's breath taught our bodies something better than tempo. He hooked his thumb in my pocket like humility. I let him. 2 afternoons later, I saw Damien in the lobby, Lemon and Ambition having learned to get along. He gave me the nod men give when they have chosen to be furniture on purpose. He didn't apologize and I didn't deputize. We shared an elevator mirror that spelled our names backward and told no lies either of us needed to correct. It isn't that we agreed. It's that we learned how to read ourselves both ways. The Artemis will keep its little rectangles. I don't trust their weight or my pocket. I trust the square of light at 4 when it climbs our wall like an idea that finally found its shoes. I trust the heat at the small of his back when my hand decides to remember its job. If another badge falls out of a tie and tries to teach me a stranger's elevator, I'll do what I did that night. Find air, choose kissing over theater, walk him home with my palm on the part of him that knows the address, and keep teaching our door, gently, stubbornly, with as many attempts as it takes, to open from the inside.